Right. So we are talking today about the Russian Church, both in the homeland and the diaspora in 1971, 1981. But we just had uh, not a full class last time, and we had a revision time. So I will be also talking about the previous period. Okay. So I would like to remind that in 1961, the Russian Church had to follow state recommendations, to put it mildly, and uh, parish priests were turned into hirelings, but they were hired by congregations, and a warden became an official, uh, uh, became uh, actually in the position of the rector of the parish. So uh, a warden starosta was in charge of hiring and firing clergy, because they would make a contract, sign a contract with this congregation. So this would give to uполномоченные, to representatives of the Council for Religion in throughout the Russia, a better control over church life. Of course, all this kind of relationship, it was kind of corrupting, because but the Soviet life in many senses also was, because there were official laws, and there were a lot of unwritten laws that you expect to sense, to understand, to play the game, to know those rules without those rules being written. So and this is what is not a civil society, or правовое общество, right? Because when you don't have checks and balances available, you won't be able. Every authority corrupts, and when there is authority without checks and balances, it's very difficult to not to be tempted by this. So, and in 1961 there was this decision, right? And then the whole period of the 60s was a period of liberation, in the sense that there was strong movement in Russia of returning back to roots. That if in the 1930s there was still very bitter attitude towards the church, like church was ideological force that competed with the new religion, so-called religion, right? Secular religion, if you want, this Marxist ideology that was turned in the Soviet Union in some kind of cult of religion. So in the 1960s, people started to appreciate culture, and as having, there was the first recording of Rostov bells sound recorded. There was a vinyl disc came out, and all those things, they were big deals. They were really big deals for the Soviet Union. So that what we have right now, when there is an ocean of Orthodox books available, it was unthinkable, something even in the early 1980s, to get an Orthodox book was a big deal. So, and to get a Bible also was a big deal. So all those things that somehow they were connected with the church, like even recording the art of bell ringing, they were under uh, as evaluation by the state. Is it going to be good? Can we tolerate this dose of religiosity, even if religiosity would be wrapped up and sold as culture? And that's how 1,000 years of Russian Christianity was celebrated, as 1,000 years of Russian culture, sort of as a cultural event. So, and there are also writers, authors started to appear, like Alexander Isaievich Solzhenitsyn. He published in the official journal his novel один день из жизни Ивана Денисовича, right, about a man who was from Gulag, right? So, and that's the fact that open conversation about somebody who went into Soviet Gulag, in the Soviet penitential system, that was a big deal, because they would, number one, admit that there were people. Number two, it resonated with thousands of people who had similar experience. So in this sense, in this situation, the mood changed, right? The mood changed, so rounding up, taking tonight interrogation, and then shoot on shooting grounds like Butovo near Moscow. Those times ended. So you may end up in a prison or a lager, or if you constantly ignore warnings sent to you. Don't do this. Don't follow, obey the game, obey the rules, follow the Soviet reality. Don't really don't really rub shoulders with the wrong type of people. Don't read things that you're not supposed to read, you know, and you will be fine. But if you constantly ignore those things, that you might end up in a prison. So it was, the Soviet Union was a prison, right? But it was quite a comfortable prison, I would say, right? And that's also important to admit. So in the 1960s, a number of clergymen started uh, to ignore those warnings about relationship between the church and state, and they decided openly speak about what was going on grounds, what was going on in reality. And one of them was Отец Gleb Yakunin, and the other one was Nikolai Shliman, and they sent a letter to Patriarch Alexis in 1966, explaining uh, explaining what was going on with closure of the churches and stuff like that. And it was something very, very inconvenient, because they didn't want to be part of the team, in the sense that Metropolitan Nicodim of Leningrad at this time, he also wanted to achieve good for the church, but he wanted to act behind the scene, sort of making deals with the Soviets, kind of I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and stuff like that, and sort of open letters and denouncing Soviet religious policy didn't really help in this sense, right? So it was therefore a delicate situation for the church, because by rebuking clergymen like Yakunin, because Yakunin did speak truth, what was happening, but sort of this truth was not needed at this time, okay? And I guess it boils down to the age-long dichotomy that makes the Orthodox Church ticks, because there are diplomats. If you look in Byzantine history, right, there are diplomats, bishops, and diplomats in a sense, not they are on assignments on the mission, but they use diplomatic language, sort of they would mention one thing, don't mention another thing, and so on. And there are zealots. There are those, there are men of God who don't want to compromise, right? They want to execute the letter of the law exactly as they understand, right? And I guess those two, they make checks and balances in the Orthodox Church. If you get rid of one group, if you get rid of the other group, there's going to be a problem. So it takes two to tango, and I think the church needs both groups. It can be very harsh when stones thrown on you, right? But at the end of the day, as I said, we're supposed to be philosophers. You understand that it's still, you're still alive. It's still not the end of the day. It's still not night yet. So, and that's something that was happening in Russia in the 1960s. It started to happen because before there was no one, I think, in Russia who would speak about things like that. They kind of represented more unified front generally. No one in the Russian church, because this young generation of, they started to get in touch with people outside of Russia. And Russian Church Abroad immediately pay attention to them, right, and started to support them. If you read periodicals, Russian Church Abroad, Father Gleb Yakunin was in front lines. But as often the case when they met real, if I said wrong name, sorry, name Gleb Yakunin, yes. So when a real life Father Gleb Yakunin met with Russian Church Abroad, they realized they're quite different. And as you know, that at the end of the day, Father Gleb Yakunin ended up setting up his own church, a Reformed church. And that's how he passed away, as a reformer, sort of as a reformer of Orthodox Christianity, the way he wanted to see it. So he didn't stop with being a rebel where he was, just pointing out to those injustices, but he also went farther, even when the Soviet Union ceased to exist. So, and that was something that Iron Curtain didn't help, because people in the Russian Church Abroad, they read their documents and they liked them. Minus cases when they would appeal to non-Orthodox. That what a big letter from Metropolitan Philaret was written to Father Gleb Yakunin, kind of rebuking him, pointing out that he should not really address to non-Orthodox leaders. But nevertheless, they applauded to their courage to stand up and speak the truth, right? So that was dynamics. And in the Russian church abroad, there also were generational changes, right? Metropolitan Anastasi passed away in 1965. Metropolitan Philaret was just a few years a bishop, right? And he was elected because he didn't belong to neither of the camps, neither zealots or diplomats in the Russian church abroad. So, and naturally he found a friend, and not a friend, but I mean advisor in the person of Father George Grabe, who has been active as a secretary of the synod from 1933, I would say. So it's already for 30 years he was a man who would express Russian Church Abroad ecclesiology and so on. But since Metropolitan Anastasi, he was a bishop well before the Russian Revolution. So he had his own experience. He have seen a lot. He was the one who designed the right of Patriarch Tikhon's enthronement, right? He had to deal with Romanian annexation of Bessarabia when the Romanian church took over his diocese in Chisinau, and he was invited to have a seat in the synod of the Romanian church. So he turns this down. He was in Constantinople in 1923 when Pan-Orthodox Congress that adopted new calendar was. So he was there, and he presented in the meeting of this Congress. Okay, then he was under the Brits in British-controlled Palestine from 1925 until he became Metropolitan in 1936. Then he was under the Nazis in Nazis-occupied Yugoslavia from 1941 until 1944. Then he presided over restoration of the Russian Church abroad. So he really had a lot, and he was very how would you say sdержанный? He was very restrained.
Reserved.
Thank you very much. He was very reserved. So And I'm not sure to what extent actually Father George Graber influenced him. He probably did, but at the same time, what I'm saying that Metropolitan Philaret, he only got pastoral school as his theological education. And Metropolitan Anastasi, they were of different weight class. So, and naturally, Father George Graber became an advisor and drafted those letters that protests against canceling of anathema by Patriarch of Inagoros and so on. And that's something that also Metropolitan Philaret felt this way. I don't want to say that Father George Graber manipulated him, but sort of also when you read Metropolitan Philaret's writings, you kind of see that it's very straightforward, but some things they might require a little bit more analysis, I would say. They like canons, for instance, that he cites, and so they might require a little bit more study, right? So, be it business as it may, we are dealing with a new, very big transitional change right now, and also we are dealing with break time.
Very, very interesting, Father.
Well, yes, it is in fact interesting. Yeah. So we are back to 1971, 1978. And the Russian Church abroad at this time, and I mentioned about this transitional period, transformational period, right? And Russian Church abroad in this time started to present herself not as a refugee church anymore, because Metropolitan Anastasi's line was, we are a refugee church. When you are in refuge, when you save your life, you don't really glorify saints, you just want to survive. And since it wasn't really clear if the Soviet Union would have ever collapsed, it was like default reality. At the same time, there were very strong eschatological expectations in the Russian church abroad, sort of expectation of the time that apocalyptic events already happening or start to happen soon. In 1977, the Synod of the Russian Church abroad adopted even a resolution that can be found in Pravoslavnaya Rus, in a biweekly journal of the Russian Church abroad, that the world entered pre-apocalyptic times. Whatever it means, for how long it would last, they didn't specify, but it was sort of understanding expressed by His Eminence Metropolitan Philaret in his last will, that держи, что имеешь, so keep what you have. I mean, it's a quote from the book of Revelation. And that was the whole understanding, that we need to close the wagons and we need to just don't lose what we have. And somehow there were very, I think, good outcomes of this. For instance, liturgical zeal, that Jordanville is known and loved and respected throughout the Orthodox world. It also was part of this, sort of preserving our liturgical beauty, liturgical customs. So that was a big part of this. I think I connected of this conservatism, in the sense of conserving, preserving things that we received from our fathers. So at the same time, Russian Church abroad started to receive clergy from all other jurisdictions without canonical releases, on the basis that leaders of those jurisdictions, they apostatize from Orthodoxy, and that would give grounds. to receive received their clergymen who would cite as reasons for their departure from those churches matter of their conscience, right? So, uh, I mean, there were things that happened for the first time, like, I mean, that lifting of anathema by Patriarch Afinagor. So it's people didn't know what to make out of this, and the two churches, the East and West, they were not in communion. Or there was strong traditions, the Orthodox Church to see Roman Catholics as heretics. So it's understandable that there was confusion about this, but at the same time, no intention to have dialogue with those Orthodox who were involved in ecumenism was really emphasized, because when you address to Patriarch of Inagoros through an open letter, kind of open letters apparently don't really work. They can only work for your constituency, for your people, that they would back you up and see, okay, no, what you said, it's really, we like it. But person to whom you address very unlikely would act on this, because it's already sort of, it doesn't leave a room for a thoughtful discussion when you're able to adjust your views, right? That's something that happened in very different tone between our two churches, when members of two groups, members of two commissions started to meet up, and they would listen uh, listen with provision that they might make adjustments, right? So, but unfortunately, no intention to have a council. So those are legitimate reasons for concerns regarding excesses of ecumenism. But I think would be also sensible to pointing them out, but then calling up a council, calling up a council that would look at those abuses or novelties or problems, and sort of on Orthodox level, because when Vladika Filaret was addressing Patriarch of Inagoros, he did use his full title. He did address him, all your holiness, the ecumenical patriarch, Archbishop of New Rome. So he, by doing this, he admitted that Patriarch Afinagor was still an Orthodox. So if he would write to him as a former bishop of New Rome and so on, then it's understandable. There is nothing to talk about, perhaps. But while he was still the Archbishop of New Rome, and he recognized him as ecumenical patriarch. So kind of at the same time receiving their clergy without canonical releases, it might be questionable. So, and we live in the shadow of this time, and many people, they see this time as actually the glorious time of the confession of the faith, right? Uh, and they see that's how things supposed to be, and that's why they felt scandalized and betrayed when Russian Church abroad started to have negotiations with Moscow Patriarchate that for so many years was called the Sergianist Church. But if we look at the official statements of the Russian Church abroad on the level of our Bishop Council, we wouldn't be able to find any evidence that Russian Church abroad uh, uh, as a church has ever considered sacraments of the Moscow Patriarchate void of grace, void of salvific grace. The only case was in 1990 when our bishops, they came up with a document where uh, that had the following phrase, that in those churches of the Moscow Patriarchate where priests adamantly and priests pray with uh, faith and so on, there are sacraments. But it was pointed out that actually it's very close to the Donatist understanding, connecting sacraments uh, with moral state of a celebrant of personal quality. So, and then next synod or council removed this phrase from the epistle, right? So it was corrected later on. But with all this process of starting to feel yourself as some kind of autonomous church, de facto Russian Church Abroad acted as autocephalous church, but the jure Russian Church Abroad never proclaimed the status. It always was emphasized that it was done out of necessity, that it was done based on Patriarch Tikhon's decree 362 that granted temporary autonomous rights to dioceses. So, and I believe that what was meant, because prior to 2007, prior to our reconciliation, there also were voices like the one of the blessed memory Bishop Daniel, our all-believer bishop, who actually said we need to be in communion with Church of Russia, but we don't need to subordinate. But then actually how it's going to be, we're going to be like another autocephalous church, what's going to be our status, and would Russian church recognize this status? So it kind of wasn't for me clear what exactly, how would canonically you define this. So, so how do sorry. Okay. Right. So, but de facto, we were canonizing saints, glorifying saints, and receiving clergy, and this new course is very clearly seen with glorifications. In 1971, St. Herman of Alaska was canonized by the newly founded Orthodox Church of America. And then in 1978, Blessed Ksenia of Petersburg was canonized. And then in 3 years' time, there was canonization of the synaxes of the new martyrs and confessors of the Russian Church. All Russian Council of 1917, 1918 already set this course, already pointed the church in this direction of collecting, gathering data, materials about the persecuted for the faith. It wasn't possible to do this in Russia, even like there were numbers of denials from Russian church officials about having persecutions in the Russian church. But in 1921, Pan-Diaspora Council in 1921, and then after this, there always were reference to the persecuted Orthodox Christians. And that's something that Russian Church Abroad was doing, and Russian Church Abroad was not supposed to do this according to Metropolitan Sergius. He really wanted to silence Russian Church Abroad. The Russian Church Abroad wouldn't speak about. But I think with the hindsight of time, of the history, I think it was sensible that Russian Church Abroad was doing this, right? The Russian Church Abroad was speaking about and delivering information, and also prayed for those Orthodox persecuted Christians, for their brothers and sisters in Russia. So this mission of the Russian Church abroad resulted in canonization of the synaxes of the confessors of the new martyrs and confessors in November of 1981 in the Synodal Cathedral in New York. Right. And believe it or not, that I remember that I was not in school one day, right? I don't remember year, I don't remember day. I only remember that I wasn't in school and I was watching the Soviet TV. And for probably less than a minute, there was a glimpse from another world, sort of church, everything in gold. And there was this announcement that the Russian emigres canonized the bloody Nicholas II in New York. And I remember this, right? I remember this, and that's something. And I had nothing to do with church, religion, or anything at this time. But somehow, since it was from very different world, that struck me. Okay, and I would like to believe that's how God communicates with us, or things like that. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, this is, I think, a proper side note on this regarding this narrative. As everything is Russian Church abroad, everything was done on home level, right? There was a monk in Jordanville, Father Benjamin, and Father Benjamin was assigned by Vladika Laver to prepare, to collect materials about those who were persecuted. So, and he went through the archives here, and Jordanville remains the largest depository of the Russian church church emigre periodicals, right? And he identified information about various people who suffered for the faith. There were direct relatives here in members of the Russian Church abroad, whose like fathers, even or grandfathers, who were suffered and killed for the faith. So they sent their materials. And based on all this information, a catalog of the names was composed. And at the end of this council was decided that this catalog of the names was still to be revised. So, and the work on this catalog was finished by the late 1990s. And all lists of those new martyrs were published as an appendix to our liturgical calendar. Somehow when they started to work under new management or something else, it came out of the use. We don't have this list of the saints as far as last time I checked as an addition to the calendar, but we have published this for a while, for years, right? But there were also problems with this canonization because understandably we don't have good information, right? There were a couple of people were still alive who were canonized, for instance, and so that's why what's going on right now when we restore the union of the Russian Church, we go through those lists and discuss those things. There is nothing embarrassing about this. It's normal practice, I think, sensible practice, right? At the same time, the Russian Church add to their own lists a number of the saints canonized by the Russian Church abroad. So, for instance, like Dr. Botkin, the one, a personal doctor of the royal family, who opted out, leaving them alone, right? He was canonized by the Russian Church abroad, and his name was recently added to the list of the saints of the All Russian Church. So this event of 1981, right, uh, was something that is still has to be analyzed. We need maybe to have a little more time to have perspective. But just think about in Jordanville with very limited resources. Father Cyprian, the old Father Cyprian, an iconographer, he designed this first ever in the world. He designed this icon. And there was a big question where to place royal family. And Vladika, of course, would be the one who was there, unlike me, Vladika Luke. And if you ever have like one-on-one with him or like with your class, it's very good also topic to ask him about those times because he was an eyewitness of all those things. So it was big conversation where to place the royal family, right? So should royal family go on top or where should it go? But if you look at this icon, you also would see ecclesiology Russian Church abroad because hierarchs are in the very upper level, right? And the royal family is in the bottom level, but in front of all other lay people. So it kind of also gives you idea about, I don't want to say, maybe I should say priority of hierarchy over over the royalties. So
One time I actually talked to Bishop Luke about that icon,
okay,
and one thing he said to me, he smirked a little bit and he said, "Oh, Father Cyprian purposely put the royal family at the bottom because people were a little bit felt weird to venerate the royal family. So he said he put them at the bottom so everyone would have to kiss them."
interesting, interesting.
And I thought that's an interesting point.
Yes, it is. Yes, that's why. I mean, Vladika, he's a gold mine of information, but he probably doesn't really value himself as a source, or undervalue himself as a source of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this icon was brought to New York. It was very, how to say, very. It's a groundbreaking event, to use basically just very, how to say, a cliche term. But also it ended all those very divisive conversation about the royal family, because the attitude towards the royal family in the late imperial Russia was negative. There were a lot of slanders regarding royal family. So they were blamed for all problems and so on. And sort of a Christian face of the last monarch wasn't really seen. And somehow this process ended those debates, right? But it took a while for the whole Russian church. It took another 20 years. And understandably, I do understand also why there were still people in the Russian church who were not satisfied with reasons for canonizations in the whole Russian church in the year 2000 that was done. But nevertheless, that's the voice of the church. That's how church acted based on many accounts of receiving help from the royal family. That's already those accounts started to be collected from the very early years, based on the fact that the last Tsar, he decided to stay with his country. He trusted his country, he trusted his people, his former subjects, and so on. And he was cowardly killed, and he was pious father of the family. So, and all those facts, and the tradition of veneration that's resulted in both churches. So it means there is something, you might have your personal opinion on him as a historical leader, and so it doesn't mean that you need to justify, as perhaps would be another extreme in our quarters when they try to prove on contrary. No. He did absolutely well on all points. That's not convincing for me. I think it does opposite result, because when you see him as a human who could err, who could do wrong decisions and so on, it doesn't really reduce him as a saint for me, because those are two different things. He wasn't canonized as a extraordinary state leader, but he was in charge of the he was head of the Russia in very demanding time. It's very difficult time and very uneven time. So he got very difficult assignment to do, but he stayed with Russia and he wanted the best to his country. And that's why he stepped down. That's also, I think, important to remember. So that canonization became a very big landmark for the Russian Church abroad. Next year, in 1982, there was local canonization of Saint Paisi Velichkovsky, Saint Paisi of Nyamets. And this canonization was done, interestingly, by local bishops, by Bishop Laurus and Bishop Mark, in St. Elijah's Keys on Mount Athos. And again, it gives you idea sort of this is jurisdiction of the ecumenical patriarchate, right? So, and St. Elijah's Key didn't recognize the ecumenical patriarch as an Orthodox, so it didn't commemorate him. It didn't commemorate him. And so Saint Paisio Velichkovsky, he died in the Romanian church, right? He died in Romania. And then Russian church abroad, Russian emigre bishops, they canonized him in this sort of within those settings. That's something that says a lot about new ethos of the church, right? Sort of. So, and in 1985, Metropolitan Philaret passed away. Okay, and in the 1970s, there, as far as I can say, there wasn't much to write home about the church in Russia. So, yeah, that's. I don't think there is. Let's see, actually, what I have here to mention. A big positive thing was that in the 1960s, there was permission from the Soviet authority to repopulate St. Pantelemon's monastery. St. Pantelemon's monastery on Mount Athos. So, and as a result, St. Pantelemon's monastery did not die out and remained within the Russian church. So, on contrary, St. Andrei's Kid, that was looked after by Russian emigres, came over to the ecumenical patriarchate when all Russian residents died out. And because St. Elijah's Kid on Mount Athos that refused to accept monks from the Soviet Union and relied on monks from the diaspora, but refused to commemorate the ecumenical patriarch after Patriarch Afinagor removed anathema, and Patriarch Demetrius, who succeeded him, also was involved in the ecumenical movement. So as a result of this situation, the Patriarch, it's in 1992, it was already Patriarch Bartholomew, I believe, right? Patriarch Bartholomew, as the Bishop of Mount Athos, he permitted that Russian monks, or like monks of the Russian Church abroad, would be taken by the police and the whole skid would change hands and come into the ecumenical patriarchate. So the skid that was built as a Ukrainian skid, because St. Andrew's skid was from the get-go set up as Velikorovsky. That's another sort of interesting thing, right? Sort of, there is neither Jew or Greek, but we still have like great Russians and small Russians. So St. Andrew's skid was founded as Velikorovsky, and St. Elijah's skid was Malarovsky. So therefore, it would be populated by monks from Ukraine or from Russia. Okay. Consequently, and in 1992, because of partially because of the conversation, how the conversation went between the abbot of the skid with commission, with Bishop Militon, who went to talk. And basically they were pressing to commemorate the patriarch. And our rocker bishops, they also were in favor the skid would commemorate Patriarch Bartholomew there. But Father Seraphim, who just passed away last year in a month of Holy's convent in Holy Land, he didn't want to do it. It was against his conscience. So, and as a result, the skid was taken from the Russian church. So now it would never come back, I guess. Please cannot expect this. So, yes, I can't really see much in the 1970s. It was sort of quiet time in the Russian church. The church was firmly established in a ghetto, and things started to change in the early, yes, there were canonizations. I believe in 1980, there was canonization of Prince Dmitry Donskoy, right? And Prince Dmitry Donskoy was the one who fought against the Mongols in the Battle of Kulikovo in 380, right? And this was the first significant victory by the achieved by the Russians against the Mongols that boost up Russian spirit. So and he was canonized by the Russian Church. He's a saint of the Russian Church as a righteousness prince. Okay, and the next big landmark was millennium of Russian Christianity, that the state permitted to celebrate as a cultural event. That was a big deal, that to celebrate this as a cultural event. And in the view of this jubilee, a monastery was given in Moscow to the Russian church, and it was really big deal. It's Danilov Monastery, and an issue of Orthodox Life came out with having this Danilov Monastery on the cover. And in the 1970s, right, there was this partition, sort of differentiation between, in the Russian church abroad, between pious regular people, clergy of the Church of Russia, and hierarchy. So, and it was still kind of, there was still a lot of sympathy toward regular people, regular believers, and whenever in the 1980s, the late 1980s, during Perestroika, there was possibility to send books from Jordanville would be sent whoever would ask for them in Russia. So regardless whether this person was in the official church or non-official church, but of course, in 1919, the Russian Church abroad decided to accept to receive believers in Russia then there would be sort of this differentiation kind of, is this one of us, or he's in Moscow Patriarchate? But nevertheless, I think overall attitude was quite amicable, sort of toward believers, minus some of the people maybe who were very, how to say, close-minded, I guess, to use this not very generous term. Okay. Right, so this is 1970s. I don't know what much to say also about Russian Church, abroad in this time. Okay, so let me just stop this recording, and maybe we will have some more of the discussions. Okay, so.